This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis.
The Download is brought to you by Podscribe. Find out more at podscribe.com.
This week, the impact of branded podcasts, continued growth in Australia's podcast scene, the Libsyn ads average CPM for August, and the $1.8 billion political ad blitz. Let's get started.
This Tuesday from Co-Host, in partnership with Sounds Profitable, podcast analytics and audience insight company Co-Host, created by Quill, has published a new report titled The Impact of Branded Podcasts. The report surveyed 50 brands of varying sizes and industries, selected from multiple channels, including podcast agency client rosters, brands in audio, and industry networks. Key findings include the fact that podcasts prove a good place for thought leadership. 76% of respondents prioritize thought leadership in their audio strategies, and find podcasts effective at establishing both brand authority and expertise. The biggest barrier to branded podcasting is initial time and resource investment, as requires a lot of resources came first at 58% agreement, with respondents ranking their top 10 biggest challenges. Second place is growing my audience, and cost comes in third. Despite the initial barriers, companies that do engage with podcasting are largely satisfied with their podcast performance. 90% of respondents reported satisfaction with the performance of their podcasts, with 52% identifying as very satisfied. Only 2 brands, 4%, marked somewhat dissatisfied, and no respondents marked very dissatisfied.
New reports from multiple sources show the podcasting scene in Australia is showing no signs of slowing. In the overall audio space, the Australian Internet Advertising Revenue Report, compiled by PwC and IAB Australia, finds podcast and streaming audio advertising expenditure increased 23.6% year over year as of June, reaching $290 million AUD. A quote from commercial radio and audio CEO Lizzie Young, quote, "Advertisers are increasingly investing in online audio because it delivers both audience trust and accessibility," end quote. Ad News highlights that the total AU online audio advertising market for 2024's fiscal year was $290 million AUD, with $105 million of that attributable to podcasting, which, all told, accounts for 4.7% of total general display ad spend for the year. Speaking of the CRA and Triton Digital have published their Australian podcast biannual report, which covers the first half of 2024. According to that study, Australian average monthly listeners tracked by Triton Digital Podcast Metrics grew 8.7% year over year. The top 5 genres in the country are sports, comedy, news, true crime, and society and culture in the top spot.
This Wednesday from Libsyn Ads. The monthly Libsyn Ads recap of podcast advertising CPM, that's cost per 1,000 impressions, on podcasts in their platform is now available. The average CPM for a 60-second podcast ad spot in August was $21.25, down 68 cents from July, and down 85 cents year over year. A quote from Libsyn CRO Rick Sela, "Podcast advertising in August 2024 presents a pivotal opportunity for brands and agencies to drive meaningful engagement. With 88% of podcast audiences describing their listening experience as deeply meaningful, the CPM rates underscore the tremendous value of reaching attentive customers." Unquote. Breaking out of the average, the 3 highest earning categories of the month were health and fitness with $24 CPM, and both technology and government tie for first with $29 CPMs. The average CPM of a 60-second podcast ads for podcasts with larger audiences fared best in August, with 100,000 plus listens per episode holding steady at $20.15, and the 10,000 to 99,999 listen range increasing 17 cents up to $23.37.
Last Wednesday from Inside Audio Marketing. It's election season in the United States, and political ad spend is now in overdrive. According to Ad Impact, a total of nearly $1.8 billion in ad spend has been kept in reserve by political campaigns in anticipation of the period between Labor Day and Election Day in November. Senate race spending alone sat aside $603 million in reservations, while the presidential race parked $401 million. Issue-specific spending makes up a good portion of the overall total, with $231 million set aside for ads regarding hot-button topics in states putting up public votes, such as the 3 states with ballots to decide on legalizing recreational marijuana use for adults. Democrats are reportedly spending more than Republicans, with a difference of 41%, possibly influenced by the sudden shift in tactics after Biden stepped aside from re-election efforts. As political channels go all out for this election season, US-focused political podcasts stand to benefit, especially as their niche nature makes it easy for advertisers to reach voters on a variety of issues. Finally, it's time for our quick hits. These are articles that didn't quite make the cut for today's episode, but are still worth including in your weekend reading. This week, I've got Saudi Arabia's podcast boon, breaking records and boosting brands by Suzy Kuban, a look at Middle East/North Africa's podcasting scene and data from Next Broadcast Media. Magellan AI introduces ReachLift measurement product. The new ReachLift tool is launched in collaboration with Wondery. Spreaker Create beta testing now open. The iOS closed beta features the new Create tools that enable full podcast production and distribution within the Spreaker app. And Chartable Analytics are back. As reported by Pod News, Megaphone publishers have received an email confirming Chartable Analytics dashboards are back online after initially encountering issues in mid-August.
And that was The Download, brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know we went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on the download section of soundsprofitable.com. And thank you for sticking with us as we bring you the top stories you might have missed from the past week. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Newton Shuttlecotty, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. Special thanks to Spreaker for hosting The Download, and thanks to you for joining us. Robot.
Download complete.